being so logical and if the West likes logic, why isn't this more accepted in psychology as a form of treatment for XYZ?
You mean the Buddhist view about the mind?
Yeah, just how to
because it's not understood.
Yeah, but why? That sounds
because I don't know why. You ask me, even most Buddhists don't understand it.
Yeah,
it's true.
I mean, you can tell from what you just said before that you've been reading certain books and about the present and this kind of business. I mean, I get sarcastic, but that's the Buddhist. That's the common view of the world. What Buddhism is, among even most Buddhists, the vast majority of Buddhists. That it's sitting down, calming your mind, making the thoughts go away, being in the present. I mean, I'm being sarcastic. Being in the moment, being mindful. That's the extent of the popular understanding of Buddhism in the West. Even among most Buddhists, even among Tibetan Buddhists, most Tibetan Buddhists don't study the Buddhist model of the mind, don't know really what attachment is, what anger is, and how the distinction. Unless you study it, you won't know it.
Well, you mean most Buddhists as in like lay people, not monks sort of thing? Or?
No, even most, depends. I mean, no, the monks, it depends. If you're studying seriously the philosophy, if you're doing the basic program, and then this program, and then that one, you're studying it, and you're memorizing it, studying it, and learning it, then you know it. But it's still then even then when you know it, it's still hard to apply it. Because the job is, the hardest part of it is the one of taking responsibility for what's in your own mind. And none of us like that. We do not want that. We don't want, that's just not being sarcastic or awful. It is really hard to do. We can be a brilliant theorist and know all about Buddhist psychology and teach it as a professor. But to practice it's another discussion, because practicing it means when you're being mean to me, I've got to take responsibility for my mind, but I'd rather blame you. Because that's the instinct of ego, is to put the responsibility on the other person. It's very deep in us to do that, very instinctive, very primordial.
So would you say that, because from my perspective I'd be like, okay, a lot of the world likes Buddhism, is it like that like yoga type of thing?
Well, it's like that. I think it's like that. I think it is like that. Yeah. For whatever reason, Buddhism's got a good reputation, you could put it that way. People like the Dalai Lama, for example. Yeah.
They don't get it, sort of thing.
Well, I mean, it's most Buddhists even. I'm not trying to, as if I know something. I'm saying, acting as if I know something. I'm not saying it like that. But I think it's hard. Or each of us remember when we've been hurt by somebody. I mean, forget about the one of just looking at your mind, but the one of karma is even harder for people. Because the instinct of ego, our habits, are so deeply caught up in the instinct of I and attachment to what I want and anger and all the hurts. I'm not trying to say you have to be Hitler to be this way. Ordinary people, ordinary. So when bad things happen, the first thing is you want to see how dare that dog bark, Call the council. It's all right, you can try and change. But even, it's all right to try and, if a person's beating me up, try and stop beating him up. It's very practical. There's nothing wrong. This is where there's not a contradiction. It's not as if you either, I'm a Buddhist, I'll put up with it. You can try and change it. Like the Tibetans are trying to change the situation, but within the framework of understanding karma, which then it does. Then it means if you have that view, you will try to change things. But if you can't, you'll accept it, and there won't be anger. But that's what's hard, because anger is a part of our being, natural, because we're samsaric. So it's hard. It's easy to know the words, but hard to do it. I mean, I go around Buddhist centres. You see disharmony everywhere. People fight. It's very hard when you're being abused by somebody or criticised or wrongly accused of something. It's very hard to practice. That's why I so admired my friends in prison, who really didn't have any choice about the matter, and they were so serious in their genuine practice of these things and truly trying to take responsibility and accepting it and living in these dreadful environments, and so many with intense sentences, especially in America, wrong, injustice, monstrous injustice, truly learning to become happy human beings within it. I mean, it's very admirable, very powerful. It's just hard. It's hard work. That's my opinion. What else, people? Yes, Chris?
Novice to...
Yes, Chris.
Good book, Guinness.
Chris, I understand you. There's millions. There's so much to read. There's so much to look at. I understand. There's so much.
I mean, I've read a few books.
What have you read? Tell me what you read.
Matthew Ricard.
Okay, good. That's wonderful.
He's good.
He's wonderful.
Dalai Lama.
Fantastic. Keep reading.
There's not sort of one.
Well, there's so many. There's so many, depending on your mind, on what you want to take from it all. But there's a good American author called Alan Wallace. He comes to Australia sometimes. He's used to be a monk. He's a scholar. He's a scientist. He speaks Tibetan. He's really good in both areas. He's got his, and he writes very well. He's a good scholar, and he teaches lots of meditation. He's a very good person. B. Alan Wallace is another one. But you're going to see his name, I'm sure, in some of those bibliographies. If you've read Mathieu Ricard, His Holiness, you're going to see those. And I'm also online. You can go on to Lama Yeshe, in our organisation, all of our teachers' teachings. There's masses and masses of them in a raw form, which you can download online as little booklets or as things to read. lamayeshe.com. LAMAYESHE.com. And there's masses of... Huh?
Sorry to interrupt. Have you written your own book?
No. I edit books.
You edit.
I decided I'd rather edit my teachers' books than be a smarty pants and write my own.
But you have a lot on YouTube too.
Huh?
You have a lot on YouTube as well.
I've heard that. Apparently there is, yes.
Yeah, there's stats.
Yeah.
I can recommend Burzenarchives.com.
Oh, also Burzin Archives too. Excellent, yeah. You'll find different people. But there's, Burzin, I think he's got called it something different now, doesn't he? But never mind. Berzin. He's a really good scholar. Alex Burzin. Sometimes you might find it difficult to understand that because he's got his own translation terms, hasn't he?
He does.
Quite unique. Yes. Do you like his terms?
I do.
You like his terms? Oh, that's interesting. There you go. Yeah. So we're going to see what happens in 100 years, which ones survive, isn't it? It's going to be interesting because there's so many different translation terms. That's the biggest confusing thing about it. It's the biggest confusion among all the scholars. They've all got different terminology.
Just one other thing, Ravina.
Yeah.
You've explained very well about how karma influences what we're exexperiencing now, and our actions today will
determine the future. Yeah.
Before the weekend's out, because there's so many novices here, can you give us a practice where we can purify past?
Sure, that's right. Exactly. Yep. No, exactly. That's right. So if you want to, yeah, exactly. Let's do that now. Then we'll do the Tara meditation before we finish. Okay. So first, most urgent level of practice, as Lama Zopa puts it, first entry-level junior school grade 1 practice is back off and attempt not to use your body and speech to harm sentient beings. Basically, that's the first step. Stop sowing more heavy negative seeds. And the Buddha would define these heavy negative actions as ones that harm others. He's saying any action that's motivated by a delusion, like eating food too much, or just shouting and yelling and screaming when no one's listening to you, you're still harming yourself. So the first level of harmful actions, he says, to refrain from, the heaviest ones, are those that harm others. But in general, once you get the idea of not killing, not lying, not stealing, not jumping on too many, wrong partners, not stealing someone else's partner, you'll also start to extrapolate and think, well, that means, okay, not eat so much cake and don't jump on too many girls, even if not harming anybody, because attachment, any actions motivated by attachment and aversion and all delusions will necessarily harm oneself. The fundamental point about karma is that actions, the key point behind Buddha's exhorting us not to do them is because they harm oneself. So that's the first one. In general, refrain from sowing more negative seeds. And as you kindly say, what's your name?
John.
John says, thank you, my tissues. And the next level of practice, Lama Zopa puts it, you've now got to take care of all the billions of seeds we've already planted in the past, because everything we've done since beginningless time, as mad as that sounds to us, none of it goes astray. Everything is stored in our mind, in our bank vaults, if you like. There's no action we've done that hasn't yet ripened that has disappeared. So we've got to start taking care of the seeds we've already planted before they ripen as our suffering. And we call that practice purification. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do this every day. And I think in the book, what have I put in there, in the course notes? Yeah, the chapter 6 is all about karma. Everything I've talked about roughly now is about karma, chapter 6. And that's including, I think, in here, roughly speaking. No, I didn't go into too much detail about purification. I don't think I mentioned it. I didn't, I'm so sorry. But okay, so let's look into that. So how do we purify karma? Well, remembering that everything we think and do and say does sow seeds that will bring fruits. And remembering we must have, the first level is stop sowing more negative seeds right now. And then the next level of practice is do something about the seed we've already planted. Put atomic bombs under them to stop them from ripening. So this purification practice, again, it's dealing with the mind. It's all about the mind. And there are 4 steps. And I haven't got it in the course notes, I'm sorry. But I can, we'll talk about it. Okay, so there are 4 steps. The 4 R's. It's a good way to remember. And like all of these things, it's really practical, It's down to earth. The first one is acknowledging the fact that I've done something. The Lamas always use they often use the analogy in this context of having eaten poison. So the second you discover, that the food you just ate had poison in it, the response you would have is this response the first step is called regret. And you go, oh my God, I can't believe it. What an idiot. I just ate poison. Quick, what can I do about it? That's the exact meaning of regret. So this means you've recognized you killed, lied, stolen, badmouthed, kicked the dog, cheated on your husband, whatever. Because you do this at the end of the day and you check up on your day, It's a simple way to end the day. It's very healthy, it's very wholesome, it's very useful psychologically to end the day with it because, we build up so much rubbish throughout the day and so much guilt and neurosis, just calming ourselves down. So you're acknowledging that you did do these things. And so because these seeds that you've planted in your mind, having done these actions that are labeled negative, which unless you pull them out will ripen as your future suffering, then the analogy of poison is then fairly evident, because you know very well what poison means is it will ripen in the future as your suffering. And guess what? You don't want suffering. That's why, oh my God, what an idiot. I can't believe I've just done this. Quick, whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor? What can I do to, reverse this? So this first step is regret. But always it's be important to point out how it's not what we mean by guilt. What we mean by guilt is, oh my God, I did that bad thing, I'm a bad person. And then we just kind of get stuck in this misery and put ourselves down, which is basically anger. And it's utterly, completely useless. It's not a helpful attitude whatsoever. It has no meaning. So regret is a really simple attitude that recognizes, yes, I cheated, or I badmouthed my boyfriend yet again today, thinking something really ordinary. You look at what you did, at the end of the day, you sit there, and you look at what you've done today, and then you can think of what you've done in this life in general. Then you can just decide, and then you can kind of regret anything you've ever done. So the way it goes is you think, okay, that action. Then you recognize, I did that action based on anger, which sowed a seed in your mind. And you're saying to yourself, I regret having done it. Now that is really important to remember. That doesn't mean, oh, I wish I hadn't done it. That's not a practical thought. Think about it. It's like saying, oh, I wish I hadn't taken that poison. If you think about it, what action comes from that? There is no action. It's a meaningless statement. So regret isn't, oh, I wish I hadn't done it, or I shouldn't have done it. Like you're a naughty girl, you shouldn't have done it. That's meaningless. There's got to be an action. Think of the meaning of this. The only thing that gives an action is, oh my God, I can't believe I ate poison. Then you go, what can I do about it? So just saying I shouldn't have done it is utterly meaningless. It's just anger and it's making you all twisted up and miserable. You did it, in fact, you sowed the seed. So what can I do about it is the question to ask yourself. You have to acknowledge that you did it. And because you know that seed will ripen as you're suffering, you have to want immediately, quick, what can I do about it? That's exactly how you'd feel about poison. Well, that's the same attitude here. And of course, we have to cultivate that because it's so abstract for us. Because we normally just go to guilt. Or we go to blame. Who put poison in my dinner? Want to blame somebody for it. Or, oh, I'm such a bad person, I ate poison. I mean, that's bizarre. It's meaningless. My God, what an idiot. I ate poison. Quick, what can I do about it? That's the attitude. And that takes time to cultivate because we don't think that way about doing actions. Especially if no one else sees them. We think, oh, no one saw me do it, I get away with it. That's how we think about negativity. That's how we think about morality. Very dualistic view about morality. As long as no one sees us do it, we think it doesn't matter. this is like thinking as long as no one sees me eat sugar, I won't get diabetes. I mean, that's a joke. We know it's not true. So this is a natural law. No one has to see you do it. No one has to judge you to do it. No one has to punish or reward you. It's a natural law that what you do will bring its own consequences. So that with that attitude, then you have to, this first step is like this owning responsibility. I did lie, I did kill, I did steal, I did badmouth, I did cheat, I did this. So this is where knowing our mind demands a lot of integrity. It demands that it implies you are the boss. This is not about someone seeing you. This is not about confessing to somebody. It's not about begging, forgiveness from somebody. None of that is the issue here. This is about you becoming your best friend. You taking responsibility for your actions. It's really important. This is the attitude. So you'd regret whatever you did that day, I bet, the bad-mouthing, the cheating, whatever. Then you can think of particular actions in this life. So I always, for example, I think about the abortion I had when I was 23 or something. I had an abortion. Out of my own ignorance at the time, I did this action. I killed a sentient being. I would call it that. That's the Buddhist view, because that sentient being was a real living being. A mind went into my womb at the time of conception, and then 12 weeks later I had it taken out, So it's called killing a human being. So I always use that example. I regret that one. Why? You say to yourself, why do I regret doing that action? Because I don't want the suffering results. We're not discussing compassion yet. This first step, regret, is compassion for yourself. It's an important way to put it. It's acknowledging that what I do ripens as my suffering, as the future. And, we're discussing the negative ones here. So it's a wholesome attitude, and it's self-respectful, and it's accountability. Then you can go, and you know what, Rabina? Talking to yourself, anything I've done since beginning this time to harm any sentient being with my body and speech, and anything I've done, breaking my vows or whatever, if you've taken vows and things, I regret from the depths of my heart, because I don't want the suffering results. You've got to speak those words out, because that just saying I regret it just ends up feeling like guilt. We've got to spell it out. I regret having done it because I don't want the suffering results. So then you go, whom can I turn to? The next step, reliance. So this is where we'd refer to the Buddha. And this is one way of describing our relationship with the Buddha, is not the same as our relationship with Jesus. And this is, again, a crucial point. I was a Catholic. I loved God. I was a devoted Catholic. I was naughty, but I loved God. I was always broken-hearted at school because all the nuns couldn't see. I didn't look holy, you see. I was always naughty, so I always felt so sad they couldn't see. I was really holy inside, but I wasn't holy on the outside, We used to have, any Catholics here? I went to Sacré-Cœur in Glen Iris. Any of you girls, where'd you all go to school? Anybody around Melbourne?
Our Lady of Victories.
Oh, very good. Well, anyway, what?
I went to Kildare.
Did you, darling? Well, we probably played basketball with each other. If we're the same age, I don't know. Looks like I didn't play basketball, though. I would have been watching. Okay, there you go. So all I know is we'd have things called congregations. Did you have those? The different societies at different levels of when you're younger and then older, and they were the special. And I used to yearn to be part of these. They call them congregations, different ones, where you'd have special practices, and they were like holy girls. You get chosen to go into them. And I never understood why the nuns couldn't see that I was a good girl. I went to Mass 7 mornings a week. Even before I was a boarder. You see, the irony is I'd go to Mass 7 days a week, but my mummy sent me to boarding school because I was so naughty. I was walking up and down Murrumbeena Road at the age of 13 trying to seduce Tony Cincotta. Probably not right the way to say his name. What's the right... Thank you, Cincotta. Tony Cincotta, the greengrocer's 16-year-old son. I was walking up and down, I was at the time of Elvis, and I had this full skirt, and we had I had a little thick chain around my neck, and Mummy's pink lipstick, and I stole her high heels and these pink fluorescent earrings from Woolies, And I was walking up and down trying to seduce him. So my mother freaked out about it when she heard, And I remember I'm little. She was only 5'2", but I was shorter then. I'm 5 foot now, and I was shorter then. I remember looking up at her, and she was telling me off. You have the audacity, she said. And I used to like reading, and I had never heard this word before. I kept thinking, how do you spell that? O-R-D, audacity. I never heard that. I was very happy to hear a new word, Anyway, she got so shocked and freaked out, she sent me to boarding school, to Sacré-Cœur. So I lived there the last 2 years. But for me, it was amazing because I felt it was my monastic karma ripening. I was in complete bliss. I studied for the first time in my life. I passed my exams for the first time in my life. I went to Mass 7 mornings a week. I was in heaven, you know. I was just in heaven. It was incredible. I loved it, absolutely loved it. My sisters, my brother, who she sent to boarding school, they hated it. I loved it. I was happy. I can't tell you. Anyway, I loved God. But the nuns couldn't see it. I knew all the Mass in Latin, you know. I mean, everything. I was on my knees when I was 13 in the kitchen, before I went to boarding school, on my knees in Murrumbina in the kitchen, begging my mother to let me be a nun like St. Teresa of Lisieux, you know. And she said no, of course. I must have been 12 then, I think. Anyway, whatever. So where was I? Oh yeah, so my relationship with God. This is, again, a crucial point. Because God is my creator, because God created the universe, God is the boss, and because a sin is doing what he said not to do, then I must confess, which in a sense is the first step. I must regret what I did, but then I have to ask God to forgive me, and forgiveness is what purifies. Do you hear this point? Forgiveness is what purifies. This is amazing, but it's not the Buddha's view. Buddha would forgive you. He's a really nice person, but it's got nothing to do with it. That's like asking your doctor to forgive you for eating sugar and somehow getting you off the hook from getting diabetes. You get my point? It's a massive difference. I'm not being sarcastic. The Buddha is like the doctor who's given advice and says if you eat sugar and you might get diabetes, and you don't go to your doctor and say, please forgive me for eating sugar, can I not get diabetes, please? That's the thing about, like, Chris, is it okay if I kill the ants? It's not a question of okay. We have to learn the rules and understand we've got to live according to the rules, and the rules take care. Laws take care. Natural laws are natural laws. So you be advised about how the natural laws work so that we choose to live according to those natural laws. That's the point. So forgiveness is not the issue here. And this, I would suggest, is often where we misuse that in our relationships, you know. Let's say John's my boyfriend and I keep cheating on him or keep being mean to him. So then I'm suddenly going to work and I'm feeling all this guilt, right? And mainly what I'm worried about is that he might reject me. It all sounds so holy, but it's not. It's really just my own self-preservation. So I ring him up, oh, John, I'm so sorry. I beg you, please forgive me. And I'm waiting to hear him say, oh, Rabina, so I still love you. And I go, phew, got off the hook again. Are you understanding my point? We really want to be approved of by others so badly. This is attachment. So that's misusing him. I'm dumping on him the responsibility to make me feel better for my bad mistake. You understand my point? And that's really wicked. We misuse each other that way. If he was really my friend, he would say, Rabina, I'm happy to forgive you, but you've got to start making decisions to change. You get my point? But I just want him to get me off the hook. That's not appropriate. But anyway, here the point is, you rely upon the Buddha, and this is where the doctor analogy is a perfect one. He's this dude who did all this work himself. He's come up with these findings, these explanations, his methodology. He's your doctor. That's the best way to put the relationship here with the Buddha, you know. So we have all these practices, and this is where the Tara type of practice comes in. And looks like we're going to end up doing them tomorrow, but we might try and do a bit tonight. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But this whole one of visualization and using the Buddhas, this plays a major role, you know, in the Buddhist practice if you're a Tibetan Buddhist. That's where, you know, Catholics will be very familiar with it, which is why the first thing Eva said when she heard about karma in Malvern, it's just like the Catholics, she said, something like that. You get, you know, so it is yes, but it's not no. You understand my point? So that's why these finer points make a big difference, to truly try to comprehend them. I'm not criticising the other ones. That's our call. We can decide what we're going to be, you know. So, the second step, well, whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon to give me the antidotes, if you like? You know, the methods that I can apply to purify myself. That I can use to help me stop getting diabetes. Just using that as the analogy for suffering, you know. That's the relationship we have with the Buddha. But I do the work. So the second step, reliance, has got two parts. And the first part is where we take refuge. So there's this is done in the context of a particular visualization practice we do in our tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist one, and all the Tibetan Buddhists, very similar. It's the visualization of the particular Buddha, and there's many, and we'll talk more about the meaning of Buddha tomorrow, as we began today, but I'll go more tomorrow, for those of you who haven't heard it before. And we would visualize above our head, and then at this point we would, if we're doing a more formal practice, or even just here in an informal way, if you're doing it at the end of the day on your own, sitting there, just thinking it through, these 4 steps, you just remember the Buddha and be delighted you've got a person whose antidotes, whose methods you are happy to use. You've chosen that doctor, you know. You've chosen the Buddha. Buddha's not shoving us down our throats. The second part of reliance is kind of odd that it's called reliance, but here it's where we have compassion for those we have harmed. The first one really is like compassion for yourself, and this is a crucial first step to get. We've got to understand karma in terms of oneself first and want to be sick of suffering so that we want to practice so we can change. You've got to have that energy, that inspiration first. Then you can have compassion for others. This is a really important first step. So here you think about those I've harmed. I think about, like, say, John, if I badmouth him, and I then think of him, and I then have compassion for the harm I've done to him. I have compassion for the baby I aborted. I have compassion for the ants I've killed, or whatever. But as much as you can, genuine empathy, because you know yourself you don't like being harmed. Well, you know, the ants join the club. They don't like being harmed either. So having compassion here. And in a sense, you're thinking that you're regretting the things you've done, not only for your own sake now, but also for the sake of those you've harmed, and only wish to benefit others from now on. This is a simple way of presenting these steps. Regret is the first. Reliance, including refuge and compassion, is the second. The third one is, they often call this where you apply the antidote. So in a sense, in general daily life, the application of the antidote to something is the opposite of something, isn't it? So in a simple sense, you could say in your daily life, you would apply the antidotes. So the antidote, in this case, if I'm always bad-mouthing John, would be very simply to say good words about him, to do the opposite, you know. If I regret killing, a practical antidote in daily life would be to save animals, to maybe help the sick, to do things that are the direct opposite. Because it's, you know, if you're playing the wrong note on the piano, by playing the right note, you adjust it, you fix it. You know, it's not as if there's still the wrong note still there. By playing the right note, you counteract the wrong note, and then you eliminate eventually the old habit. Well, that's really the simple thing about karma. By having a positive thought, I counteract a negative thought. By doing a positive action, you counteract a negative one. It's very simple. You know? Whereas often we tend to think, well, this heavy-duty guilt, oh, I'm a bad person anyway. No. There's nothing you can't purify. There's no tendency in our mind we can't change, you know. It's very dynamic. It's up to us. So here, in this case, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's a particular visualization practice we do that involves the Buddha and involves the recitation of a certain mantra. And this is where the Tara practice fits in. This is all from the Vajrayana. And the Tara practice is a variation of this kind of practice, which we will probably do before we go home. We will. We've got the time. This one's a slightly different variation of it. But in this third step, the antidote, we would do the visualization of the Buddha, and, you know, and these meditations are just, they're very appealing, actually. You're using your creative imagination, and you're just imagining nectar coming and filling you and purifying and blah, 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 and you say these certain mantras. So remembering the point in karma that everything we say and do and think brings a result. So even by the Buddhist approach is very much by even just thinking of the Buddha, because a being who's achieved Buddhahood is a very potent being, a very potent energy, and that just leaves imprints in our mind of that. And then visualizing, purifying all my negative karma is a very powerful, positive thought that can't help but be an antidote to the negativity. There's nothing more or less than the positivity and the negativity. It's not some kind of secret negative person in there that it was never going to change. Everything we do with our mind changes it. It's dynamic, you know. As Lama Yeshe says, we create negativity with our mind. We create positivity as an antidote with our mind. It's our mind that does the work with sincerity and determination. So this third step is you recite this mantra.